Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video on the Gooners and Gloves Podcast channel. In today's video, it's going to be the 56th Gooners and Gloves Podcast, and I'm going to be giving you guys my thoughts and reactions to the Joyce vs Hrgović fight. This took place last night and was actually a very entertaining fight, as I predicted in my video. I did say that I thought that this one was kind of being slept on. Not that many people, thought it was going to be good, but I actually did think it was going to be good, and I certainly wasn't wrong. It delivered. It was a very entertaining 10-round heavyweight slugfest. Really entertaining fight, and one that I'm actually looking forward to analyzing. So as you guys can see, I have introduced a new segment to these fight reaction videos. So going forward, I'm going to say 3 things that I think that each fighter did well. So as you can see on the screen, I've got 3 things that I think Hrgović did well and 3 things that I think Joyce did well. So I think this will just make the videos a bit more interesting. I'll probably also talk about what I don't think they did well as well, but I think on the screen from now on, just to make the video a bit more interesting and to make the analysis a bit better, I'll be talking about 3 things that I think each fighter did well. So we will get into all of that. So Hrgović won by unanimous decision. So I did get the winner correct, as I predicted Hrgović to win, but I didn't quite get the outcome right, because I said Hrgović would win by KO or TKO, so basically by stoppage between rounds 6 and 8, but that didn't quite happen, as Joyce did make the he did go the distance. He made the final bell. If I'm honest, there really could have been a case to stop the fight a bit earlier. I know Joyce has a fantastic chin, and the shots, like you could see, they weren't really rocking him just because of how good his chin is, but that doesn't mean they're not damaging his brain. The shots that Hrgović were landing, and he was landing some heavy shots, they're still they're still shaking Joyce's brain, they're still damaging his brain, and for him to be taking that many shots at points just completely unanswered, just really I really felt that the fight could have been stopped earlier, if I'm completely honest, but we'll get into all of that. But alas, Joyce did make the final bell, so did Hrgović, and Hrgović won by unanimous decision. Hard to argue against that call, of course. I mean, he clearly landed the better punches. He was the effective aggressor and ultimately was able to outwork Joyce. That being said, though, Joyce certainly did well to prove me wrong. I've got to be honest, I thought that Joyce was going to get stopped, and I thought that he wouldn't really be able to make the distance, but fair play to him, he did make the distance. He did land good shots of his own, and to be fair, he did hurt Hrgović at multiple points, which, in fairness, I did say in the first video that Joyce has ridiculous power, and he certainly is a threat, and he proved that last night with some really good shots landed. But Hrgović, again, came back with his own. So let's kind of get into how the general fight went, and then I'll analyze a bit of what they each did well and what they didn't do well. So the fight started off definitely quite quickly, fast out of the blocks, and both men actually hurt each other immediately. So Joyce in the very first round was able to open up a cut on Hrgovic's, I think it was his right eye. He opened up a cut just above the eye, and those cuts are never good, because what happens is when the blood drips out, it goes into your eye, and therefore you can't actually see. So you could tell that for the first few rounds it was definitely disturbing Hrgović a bit, and for that reason Joyce was really able to build up a good tempo, was able to build up some good momentum, and yeah, so it was a good shot by Joyce to open up that cut. But to be fair to Hrgović, in that same round he came back and he did actually cause a little bit of bruising on Joyce's eye. I think he just landed a really good straight, and that did cause a bit of bruising on Joyce's eye, and we would see that get worse as the fight went on. So definitely a fast start for both men in the first round. Joyce opening up the cut, and then Hrgović bruising Joyce's eye and just generally hurting each other. But I would say that Joyce kind of did start off a bit better in the first few rounds. I think Joyce kind of built up a good tempo, good momentum, and I do think that Hrgović was just a bit rattled. He probably, I'm not saying Joyce was fast, because as expected, one of the big problems that Joyce had in this fight was just his lack of speed. He just has really slow hands, and he doesn't throw punches fast. But to be fair, I do think that Joyce probably started a bit faster than what Hrgović was expecting, because I think by Joyce's standards, he was quite fast in the first few rounds, and I think that's just something that kind of took Hrgović a bit by surprise. So Hrgović was getting hit with some shots, and Joyce was doing well to kind of come forward, put the pressure on, land the hooks, etc. Then moving on into the next few rounds, understandably, it kind of started to even out a bit more. Hrgović kind of started to read Joyce's erratic rhythm a bit more, so he started landing, and obviously one of the best things that Joyce did throughout the whole fight was the 1-2 combination, the jab cross. I mean, this combination was just ridiculous. Hrgović literally threw it so many times, and his accuracy with it was just ridiculous. Like, that right hand was just landing like a sniper, seriously. Like, that right hand just kept getting through the guard of Joyce, and it was an absolute rifle of a punch, and it was definitely probably the best thing that Hrgović did throughout the night was that 1-2 combination. Just landed it with so much precision, so much accuracy, and the thing is, it was really good because obviously Joyce had a bit more of an erratic rhythm. He was kind of coming forward kind of unpredictably, and I think that's probably what he wanted to do, and I think Hrgović picked up on that, and so he started throwing that 1-2, and you could tell it was just really ruining Joyce's rhythm, because obviously Joyce, as mentioned before, he doesn't have fast head movement. Basically, he's just quite slow. Okay, there's no other way of putting it. He is slow. slow, he doesn't move fast, he doesn't have good head movement, etc. And it's something that Hrgović took advantage of, and every time he'd land that jab, by the time that Joyce would even be able to move his head out of the way for the jab, immediately Hrgović would just come in with that huge right hand. By that point, Joyce's hands went away from his face. Obviously, as mentioned before, Joyce has a ridiculous chin, so, like, seriously, his punch resistance is insane, and especially at this age. But that being said, just because he's got great punch resistance, it doesn't mean that the referee should just let the fight go on forever. And as I said before, I do think the referee could have ended it probably around the 8th or the 9th. Definitely didn't, like, I don't know. I know Joyce is a warrior. I know he's got ridiculous punch resistance, but having good punch resistance and not being shaken on the outside doesn't change the fact that your brain is still getting rattled, your brain is still getting shaken, and ultimately your brain is still getting damaged. But anyway, as the fight progressed, Hrgović kind of found that 1-2 was a really good combination, so he just kept throwing that 1-2 and he kept landing at a good efficiency. But to be fair to Joyce, he did have an answer of his own. Joyce began to notice that every time he came forward with hooks to the body and then to the head, like, it was kind of ruining Hrgovic's rhythm as well. So as the fight went on, Joyce did begin to come forward a bit more, and to be fair, at points he was getting hit, but there were also other points that he was able to actually back Hrgović up and land those hooks. And I think the hooks, as you can see from what Joyce did well, were definitely a good punch for him. Obviously we know that that Joyce has always had really good looping punches, his hooks, his uppercuts, etc., and they were certainly very good last night. You know, the straight shots, as you know, as mentioned before, weren't really the best from Joyce, but he definitely made up for it with some really good hooks, the uppercuts, the body shots. They were definitely very good, and at the points where he was able to come forward and actually back Hrgović up, I think he definitely landed some good flurries of hooks and uppercuts for sure. So we get to the mid stages of the fight, and to be fair, I think this is when Joyce kind of began to get back into it a bit. So this is when Hrgović was starting to get a bit tired. Obviously, Hrgović was kind of the one moving around the ring quite a lot, and I would say kind of throughout the early rounds, Joyce was doing a lot of like the chasing. So obviously it meant that Hrgović was starting to get a bit tired from constantly moving around the ring and being chased around and being backed up. So I think this is where Joyce kind of began to take a bit more control of the fight, landing some really good shots in the mid stages, continuing with the hooks and the uppercuts. The body shots were also starting to really land well for Joyce, and that was also tiring Hrgović out. And in general, I think Joyce's just defense got slightly better in this round. Unfortunately, it got worse later in the fight, but at the mid stages of the fight, I think this is where Joyce's defense got a little bit better. So I think Joyce was just doing better at this point and kind of landing those good shots and really backing Hrgović up. But then we get to about round 7 to 10, and I think this is just where Hrgović completely took control of the fight. I think at this point, Joyce was completely knackered, completely spent, and so Hrgović just started really having a field day. The 1-2 punches were absolutely fantastic, the combinations in general, and yeah. You know, and this is when Hrgović was a lot easier able to cut off the ring. Obviously, Joyce was tired, so Hrgović just kind of cut off the ring, landed the 1-2, followed up the 1-2 with some brilliant combination punching, and I think just kind of saw the fight out. I think between round 7 and 10, this is when Hrgović just completely took control, and I think this is what won in the fight on the scorecards. Just Joyce was completely exhausted, and as a result of that, Hrgović just began landing the 1-2, the combinations, cutting the ring off, throwing the flurries. But yeah, so this is why I felt at this point in the fight that the fight really could have been stopped, because Hrgović was just landing so many shots, and at multiple points they were unanswered as well. There were points that they were unanswered. As I said before, I know that Joyce wasn't really being hurt just because his chin is so ridiculously good, but it doesn't mean that his brain isn't being hurt. His brain is still being hurt just the same. His brain is still being damaged, and so I definitely felt that the fight could have been ended a couple rounds before. But alas, that brings us to the end of the fight. Hrgović by unanimous decision. So in terms of what I think Hrgović did well, first of all is the combination punching. The combination punching was fantastic. Obviously, the one big banker combination was the 1-2. That's the one that landed so much for Hrgović. But aside from that, the hooks and uppercuts to the body, and I just think in general he did well to follow up that 1-2. So a lot of the time he'd land the 1-2, but then immediately hook to the body or uppercut to the body or uppercut, and I think that was just really good. So the combination punching generally from Hrgović I thought was fantastic. Landed the 1-2 and then immediately followed it up with good hooks, good uppercuts, etc., etc. So that was really good. Next was Hrgovic's speed. As I predicted in my prediction video, I knew that Hrgović would have the speed advantage, and that certainly was apparent last night, and Hrgović did really well to take full advantage of it. The speed was really, really good from him, and I think that, yeah, I think Hrgovic's speed advantage was definitely prevalent throughout the fight, and I think that Hrgović did a fantastic job to take advantage of it. He had fast hands, he had quick movement, he had good head movement, and it was definitely something that was really ruining Joyce's tempo. And then finally was cutting the ring off. I think that Hrgović did really well to cut the ring off. There were multiple points he cornered Joyce, there were multiple points he trapped him against the ropes, and when he did, he would make sure to go to town and land some really good combination punching as well. So I think the combination punching and the cutting the ring off kind of go hand in hand, because when you do one, the other one becomes a lot easier. And then in terms of Joyce, I think firstly the hooks that were really good from Joyce. The hooks were definitely great, and to be fair, the uppercuts as well. But I think the hooks especially, there were multiple points he was landing some flurries of hooks to the body and to the head, and this is when I think he was really hurting Filip Hrgović, because to be fair, I will say that Joyce was hurting kind of. I would say that even though Joyce didn't land a large amount of punches, when he did land the punches, I think he was definitely hurting Hrgović. No doubt about it. He was shaking Hrgović, he was moving, and he was definitely hurting him. So the hooks for me, I thought were a really good punch from Joyce. The hooks, the flurries, etc. Then we have the power. So as I said, I think power-wise, Joyce was probably slightly better. Hrgović certainly had huge power shots of his own, but I think just because of Joyce's chin, he just didn't really feel them that much. But obviously Hrgovic's chin isn't quite as good, so there were points where Joyce was rocking Hrgović, and I think in general, while he didn't land a lot of punches, I think the ones that he did certainly counted, and he definitely was hurting Hrgović at multiple points. Obviously, as I mentioned before, he opened up the cut. And then finally is his punch resistance. Obviously, his brain was certainly being damaged, but his punch resistance on the outside was fantastic. He was barely feeling the power punches. His chin was absolutely ridiculous, and there were points he was able to kind of cover up a bit and tried to kind of minimize the damage. While I do feel the fight could have been stopped earlier, the fact is it wasn't, and due to it not being stopped, Joyce's punch resistance did really, really well, especially at his age of 39, and it brought him to the end of the fight, and for that is, you know, big respect to Joyce. Obviously, as mentioned before, I think what I think they didn't do well. Well, Joyce, I think the hands were down too much. I think, that probably is just due to tiredness, to be honest. Like, he probably just was tired. Obviously, he's quite heavy. They're both heavy, so obviously they were both tired. So I think that's probably something that Joyce didn't do too well. And probably the same for Hrgović. His hands were definitely down at points as well. But also, I think another thing that Hrgović didn't do well is that he was letting himself get backed up a bit too easily at points. As mentioned before, especially in the midway stages of the fight, I think Hrgović was just letting himself get backed up a bit too easily, and that definitely was giving Joyce a lot of success. Another thing I don't think Joyce did well is, as mentioned before, cutting the ring off. So this is something that Hrgović did do well, but I think Joyce just didn't quite do it well enough, because I could tell that at multiple points he was trying to cut the ring off, but again, I think it was just a speed disadvantage. Just when you're not fast, Hrgović was able to immediately, Hrgović could sense it a mile away, so he immediately made sure to pivot out and move out the way, whereas obviously with Hrgović, he did it a bit quicker and a bit more subtly. So for that reason, Joyce, even if he did notice it, he just couldn't quite pivot out in time, and Hrgović was able to beat him to the punch. But all in all, a very entertaining fight. I really enjoyed analyzing this fight. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought of the Hrgović-Joyce fight. I thought this was a really entertaining contest. I thought it was a slugfest, and massive respect to both men. In terms of Joyce, I think he either doesn't continue fighting or he just improves his defense. I think he probably just needs to get some coaches that really focus on his defense, because I just think the lack of defense really, really caused a lot of damage. I mean, you know, on a real level, I do think these are the sorts of fights that do take years out of your life, if I'm completely honest. And yeah, it was just a really rough fight for Joyce in terms of the punches he took. Sure, he has a great chin. Sure, the punches weren't like rocking him on the outside, but they definitely were on the inside. The brain was getting rattled. The brain was getting damaged. So I think in terms of Joyce, he either doesn't continue fighting, or alternatively he finds coaches that really, really prioritize his defense and really get him defending well, because he just, you know, he can't just get through fights by taking huge shots like this. In terms of Hrgović, obviously there's still many fights for it to be made with him, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does next. But all in all, a highly entertaining fight. I really enjoyed it, and please let me know down below what you guys thought. What did you think of each fighter's performance? Where do you think each fighter goes next from here? And do you guys agree with my analysis, or do you have anything that you disagree with? Please let me know. But in any case, I'll catch you guys on another podcast soon. Thank you so much for watching. Obviously a really exciting next week, because we've got the Arsenal Real Madrid game, which I'll be making a video on immediately after, and of course we've got the Ennis versus Staniosis fight, which I'll be making a prediction and the reaction to. So lots of exciting stuff to come up on the channel, so please look forward to it. But yeah, I'll catch you guys on another podcast soon. Bye bye.